I'd like to call forward Tommaso Venturini, researcher at MediaLab at SciencesPo, Paris, and also assistant professor in digital humanities at King's College London. He will have as his respondent Fabian Flöck, who I'll ultimately ask to come up here and sit when after Tommaso is finished. And then every speaker will also have a respondent who is a speaker. Every speaker will be able to respond also to every other speaker with a single question. So without any further ado, Tommaso, you have the floor.
Hello, and thank you, everyone. Thank you particularly to the organizing team, Richard and the other, for having me here today to talk to you about Contropedia, this project that we have started 2.5 years ago. The first thing that I have to say is that I haven't done much myself, actually, in this project, so I'm even more grateful that you are inviting me to discuss about it. These are the people that actually did Wikipedia, and you would recognize Eric Bora, who is also up there, and Esther Felteverter, who here at DMI Initiative have played a very important role. Other people are working at the University of Barcelona, and others are working at the University of Milan. Contropedia is, and I'm citing from the website of the tool, a platform for the real-time analysis and visualization of controversies in Wikipedia. Controversy metrics are extracted for the real-time activity streams generated by two things: the edits and the discussion about individual articles and group of related articles. An article revision history and its corresponding discussion page constitute two parallel streams of interaction that, taken together, fully describe the process of collaborative creation of the article. Contropedia builds on the state-of-the-art techniques and extends current metrics for the analysis of both edit and discussion activity. We will come back later on to this sort of double nature of Wikipedia that looks both at the edits of the Wikipedia page and of the discussion in the talk page. But Wikipedia does not only analyze edits and history, but analyze them for a very profound political motive. And that comes from the fact that Contropedia was started within another project called eMaps. You see the nice logo there. That is a project about controversy mapping. Controversy mapping is this weirdish technique of analysis that the guy that you see there, you might recognize, is Bruno Latour, developed over the last 20, 30 years. And the political objective of, and I've translated it in English, the political objective of controversy mapping is well expressed, I think, in the introduction to, written by Bruno Latour, to a famous book by Walter Lippmann, the famous American journalist, called The Phantom Public. And in that book, Bruno writes, can we organize our public lives so to facilitate, thanks to some simple and robust signals, the detection of those that, involved in the inevitable controversy, are the most capable to justify their position, and, on the other hand, those demanding us just to accept their arbitrary judgment. If this signal exists, can we multiply them, make them more evident, familiarize ourselves with them, learn how to entertain them? We do not have other choices. If this signal fades away or disappears, there will be no public life anymore. Democracy will be impossible. The very sense of politics will have disappeared for good. It's quite of a burden on our shoulder. And what we try to do in the Contropedia project is precisely to use the information that Wikipedia makes available on the editing and on discussion on their pages to detect in controversies these signals that Bruno Latour is talking about. The proxies that can help citizens, the phantom public, according to Lippmann, to align behind the actors that seems to be more capable of solving the controversy in the good direction. But that, as you understand, is a quite extreme attempt in repurposing the media. Richard talked a lot about it in this introduction, but I also give you the quote from his fabulous book, Digital Methods, when it says, digital methods, which is actually what we are doing in the Contropedia project, repurpose or build on the top of dominant devices of the medium, and in doing so, make derivative work from the result, figuratively and literally. Follow the methods of the medium as they evolve, learn from how dominant devices treat natively digital objects, and think along with those object treatments and devices so as to recombine and build on the top of them. Strive to repurpose the methods of the medium for research that is not primarily or solely about online culture. And let me give you one last quotation by another scholar that worked a lot with Richard and with us in this reflection about repurposing media, Norcha Mares, who says, while it is both necessary and advantageous to deploy medium-specific device in issue mapping, so when you do controversy mapping, issue mapping, it is of course very important to be very close and respectful to the specific nature of the medium that you are studying, Wikipedia, for example. But, she says, it seems to me that we must do more than just follow the medium. We must push back in equal measure. We must put in place specific safeguards to ensure that our analytics reveals issue-specific and not just medium-specific objects. And this is precisely what we have tried to do in the Contropedia and in many other projects in controversy mapping. The problem with that is that this forces us to deal directly with one of the most complex questions in media studies, which is the separation, or rather the lack of separation between the medium and the message. Right? You know that there is this very famous sentence by Marshall McLuhan in Understanding Media, where he said the medium is the message. But what does that actually mean? Right? It is clear that to a certain extent, the medium is not the message. Like, otherwise, it would have been just that if looking at sepia picture, you would imagine that the world had been sepia before autochrome photography was invented, which is, of course, not the case. But at the same time, the medium, all the media, not just in Wikipedia like the others, do not only just transport some message, but they also transform it. Like in the fact that, for example, we have newspaper or coffee places, according to, for example, the very famous analysis by Jürgen Habermas, did not just allow to transport discussion about democracy, it made modern democracy possible. So what is in the medium that is specific to the medium and that should be some way sort of removed as a bias of our analysis, and what is in the medium that is transforming the social phenomenon that are mediated to the medium? So that's a very complex question, and unfortunately I don't have an answer, but what I can do, what I will try to do in the second part of this short talk, is to give you a list of other distinctions and separation that are equally problematic and controversial, but which might help us to think about this medium message separation. So these are the list. We'll see them one after the other. So the first, one of the first distinction we have to work with in the Contropedia project was striving to separate the action from the objects. So basically, what Wikipedians are doing in the platform from the objects that circulates in the project, in the platform. And that was implemented in the Contropedia project with a separation between text and wiki objects. So we know that when Wikipedians here see a screenshot of the Contropedia platform on the page of climate change, and here you see very clearly that when Wikipedians are editing a Wikipedian pages, they are editing a chunk of text, like a sentences or a number of sentences. But in fact, what we decided to do in the Contropedia project is not to aggregate those edits by the sentences that they concern because sentences change too quickly, so they are not a good item around which we could aggregate our results, but we use instead wiki objects. So basically the links and other elements, but mostly the links and titles and images that appear in the Wikipedia pages. But that, of course, also creates this problem that when a user is editing a word that in the same sentence in which a wiki object appears, is it discussing the wiki object or is discussing the context of the wiki object? And what's the separation between the sentence and the actual action of done by the user? And here you see too, so this is and of course the platform of Wikipedia plays with this distinction and tries to provide the user with both. So this is a screenshot of the interface that gives you the actual point of the sentence that had been edited. And here is another, the other main interface of the platform where all the same modifications are aggregated by wiki object. And so you will see the most controversial wiki objects in the global warming page, for example. The second separation, we discussed it a little bit already, is the difference between the action and the discourse. That is also a very classic problem in social sciences and in particular in controversy mapping, to being able to follow at the same time what people and what actors do and what actors say about what they do. And of course, it doesn't really, it overlaps to a certain extent, but it's not, of course, always the same thing. And that's why in Contropedia, we're both following the edits as captured in the edit page, in the history page of each article, but also the talk page, where editors discuss about the changes that they've made. They say, I've made this change because of the reason, that reason, I think. And, you know, none of them alone is enough to understand what's going on in Wikipedia. You really have to do both. That is what we learned from this project. The third separation that we tried to implement, but that was also very difficult, is to separate actions from noise. That has a lot to do with the medium message distinction we discussed before. Because when we started to try to identify controversial wiki objects in wiki pages, we very soon stumbled on the project that what appeared to be very much discussed in Contropedia were not necessarily things that were controversial, but just things that were important for Wikipedians. For example, it might be hugely important for Wikipedians and for Wikipedia in general whether two pages are merged or not. Right? Because it has a direct impact on the structure of the encyclopedia. But that might not refer to an actual controversy interesting the rest of the world. It might be very, very specific to Wikipedia. So how do we separate meaningful action from noises? And basically what we did is that we discovered, and that's a complicated equation that does this, but what it does, you have it in human language on there, is that it separates, for example, we do not take into account what is modification edits that are marked as vandalism, because that appear to be massive edits, right? The old page disappears, so you would say, well, that's a big change. But in fact, vandalism is reverted back by bots in a few seconds. So it's not really an important modification. We only took into consideration edits that contains at least one deletion, right? Because if people were just adding to the pages, were not necessarily disagreeing, they were just, normally there's a lot of, when a new page is created in the first days or weeks, there tends to be more activity on the page just because people are filling in the gaps of the page. And we did not, for example, consider something we considered at the beginning when full sections were inserted or deleted, because that often happens when sections are renamed. So it appears as if the whole section was changed, but in fact it was just renamed. And then we also, and then it gets even more complicated, we try to take into consideration the identity of the people editing the sentences. And in particular, we took into consideration the engagement of the users on the page, following the idea that if an edit that is made by a user that is already very engaged on the page is more relevant from a controversy mapping viewpoint than an editor that is just made by someone that passed by and changed something and then disappeared from the page. But at the same time, we also discarded or tried to discard edits of the couples of editors that tended to revert or edits each other a lot, because that might be a signal of an edit war in Wikipedia and not so much of a substantial controversy. It might just be two people not getting along, and that's why sort of reverting each other on the page. The third, I've lost count, but this next separation is between action and actors, and particularly between action and actors faction or actor groups. And that was a very difficult things to obtain, because what we have in Wikipedia is basically negative action, right? And that's interesting when you're studying controversy. You're very much interested in knowing who has reverted whom and who has changed whom. But it's also very difficult to treat with network analysis, for example, because all the both visual and mathematical tools that we have in network analysis consider hedges that connect nodes. So what would be in a network to have an edge of opposition? So there was a complex problem to solve, and the way we solved it for the moment is probably not, we might do better, maybe. But what we did is that we sort of reversed the network of revert and edits to network in which the friend of my enemy is my enemy and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So basically, if we are both reverting the same third user, we are friends. And so we are connected not because we are reverting each other, but because we are both together reverting someone else. And so that's what allowed us to obtain this edit faction, as we call them, so groups of people that tends to revert each other. When the controversy is very binary, it works pretty well. But when, as in most cases, controversies are multiple with a lot of faction reverting others, then this kind of solution works not so good. And the last, but very important distinction that we try to make is about distinguishing action from context. In standard social theory, you have things like the macro structure, and then you have other things like the micro interaction. And the macro structure is the social context that is supposed not to change, right? And in this social context, you have other things that happen that are the micro interaction and exchanges between individuals. But when you start doing work on Wikipedia, and it's actually true for many online research, you then understand that there's not such separation in Wikipedia. What would be the context of the page if the whole page can be changed at any time by any user? And to give you a very concrete example of this, how do we remember that when we do in Contropedia? I have a slide here. Okay, sorry. Here. Oops, sorry. What we do in Contropedia is to highlight on the pages the most controversial wiki object. But what can we do when one of those controversial wiki objects is deleted from the page? Right here you see the two interfaces, and you see that on global warming, list of scientists opposing mainstream scientific agreement, and oceans, they are the two last at the bottom of the page, are not present in the page anymore. So how do we even visually show that there's an action that concerns something that disappeared from the concept, from the context of the page, that disappeared from the page altogether? And so that's why we had to have both heat maps showing the different level of controversiality on the page itself, overlaying on the page, but also timelines like this one that sort of extract stuff from the pages and show it in a more aggregated way. So all these different complex distinction that we are still struggling with, that we have not solved, I hope, lead us in the direction of finding some interesting answer, or at least some interesting question to the problem of separating the medium from the message. Thank you very much. And here you have a few articles by the people that actually did the Contropedia platform, so if you want to read them. Okay.
So let's introduce Fabian Flöck, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology.
Actually, the appellation changed to Jesus. I think I didn't notify you. Cologne. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good.
Fabian?
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Tommaso, for the interesting talk. And of course, I already knew Contropedia before, so I will pretend this was the first time I heard about it, because I like the project very much. It's really cool. The first question I would have is more of a meta question in terms of, you talked about the fact that you would like to see, you try to infer, for example, conflicts for the pseudo-public or something. How representative is it really when you look at Wikipedia, what people talk about? Because you mentioned they talk about these internal wiki things, you try to filter them out, but even the other things that they disputed there, they have conflicts about, are they actually telling you something about public in general? And have you thought about evaluating that by looking at what is, for example, controversial in the media outside?
Just maybe you want to complete all the questions.
I should take all the questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, but I have a lot. Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay. So sorry, I'm new to that format of the respondent. Sorry. The other question I would have is in terms of the controversy scores. It's more of a technical question. Does it really make sense to boil down the controversy of a sentence to the main linked concept? Because there are many sentences, for example, that do not have concepts and they're still controversial. So I've been doing something similar with other means, and often either the sentence does not have a concept or the controversy does not concern the concept in that sentence. So is it not actually misleading to assign a conflict to a concept when it's actually quite undisputed? So you can see some of, for example, in the lead of an article, you often have a lot of edits and going back and forth that actually are not conflicting about the linked concept in that sentence. So is that not actually misleading a user when he's seeing all these markups? The third question would be, I'm not sure if you have a target group for this. Like, is it editors? Is it normal readers? Is it like everyone that reads Wikipedia? So how useful is this from a reception point of view, like from a psychological reception thing point of view? Like, can users actually do something with that information? Like, how do they actually, is it actually useful to the reader? Does he reinterpret the article if he sees these markups? So you might be familiar with WikiTrust, which is a project that highlights passages it thinks are untrustworthy. There has been work by a cognitive psychologist from Twente, Toyn Lucassen. He actually evaluated this with 40 users. So what he says basically is, it's nice to have this, and people trust less in the whole article when they see this, and they are more critical, but you cannot really make use of a highlighted word in a complete sentence. You cannot just cognitively just trust that one word less than everything else. So when they evaluated it, they actually said, in the end, the usefulness of this was rated like 3 out of 6 by everyone, because I don't know what to do with this information. It looks nice, but what to do with it? So that would be my third question. Another one would be, did you actually ever look at how these controversy scores that you get from this, how they actually correlate with controversies that are marked up in Wikipedia or with other measures, because there are other works out there that do it on the whole article. Did you ever think about, want to do this or have done this to look at how well it actually or agrees with the manual markup, for example? Because that would give you a feeling of how accurate this actually is. Because one thing I see here is also, you try to filter out all this noise, like you call it, and that's true. There is a lot of noise in Wikipedia. So is that actually successful? Because what I can see is that only by deleting stuff around a concept, that could be updates, that could be rewordings. So calling everything that is a delete or an add and a delete a controversial edit, and that's basically what you're doing with these metrics, seems to me quite tricky. Because what you, for example, see is updates. There is a hurricane going on, there's a hurricane article, people just updating the times or the wind speeds, and they go back and forth and back and forth. You cannot call that a controversy. So that's basically what you're doing here. So did you think about how to better categorize these things? I know that is a really hard thing to do, because that's, that you need some machine learning or manual annotation probably. And do you think it's actually impacting what you do much, or it's not so important?
Okay, Tommaso, you have just a few minutes to answer all those questions.
That's quite a lot of difficult questions. Well, I'll try to answer. No, it's fine. That's your job. I think that there's a misunderstanding about what Contropedia is, and it's a misunderstanding that we ourselves in the project had at the beginning, and it took a lot of time to understand that what we were not doing was developing a tool that would allow to detect or identify controversial pages or controversial sentences or controversial wiki objects. So at the beginning we did actually put a lot of thought in how could we match the result, what we found out to be controversial with what is controversial in the media, or can we have a better definition of what a controversial edit would be, so that we can clean even more noise, or can we match, as you said, we of course try to do that. Can we see if what we obtain as the most controversial elements matches what the Wikipedians themselves call as, and there are plenty of lists on Wikipedia of the most controversial pages, or the most controversial objects, and the most controversial editors, blah, blah, blah. And we tried all this, but then we understood that, and then by then also trying to answer to the question about who might be the possible users of Contropedia and how they can use it. We understood that maybe what was more interesting for us in this project was not so much trying to quantify controversiality and say this is more controversial than that, but rather giving to scholars, and possibly Wikipedians as well, a tool that allows them to qualitatively look into the edits on the pages. So, for example, something that we now do is that we normalize the level of controversiality of the object on one page. So when you compare two different pages, for example, they will look equally controversial, right? Because they will be both very red in many parts. But that doesn't mean that they have the same number of edits on both, and not even controversial edits on both. It's only that we normalize so that we can give scholars, researchers, the possibility to say, well, in these pages that interest me, for whatever reason, these are the more edited parts. These appear to be the most controversial parts. Which also means that, strangely enough, we sort of tended to move from the most complicated equation that I show to the simpler one, because eventually we understood that the user was not that much interested in us filtering out all the noise. Because the user of Wikipedia is an expert of the controversy. It is the user that defines the pages as controversial. This is also connected to some resource problem, right? The Contropedia project was financed under another the EMAS project, so we never had an actual funding for itself. So we are not actually analyzing the old Wikipedia. What happens is that researchers write us, or actually they write Eric up there, and say, Eric, can you add this page because I'm studying this specific controversy and I'd like to see what happened on Wikipedia. And so those people there, it's the user that define that this page is controversial. You see, and then those users, those expert users, they want everything, right? They don't want to say, yeah, maybe it's just people updating the time of the hurricane, but I want to see it. Because they want to follow each and every modification. And what they need more is a tool that help them to follow this modification. Because they could look at the history page, but that's very complicated for people that are not expert Wikipedians. So the users are expert of the subject, but not necessarily of the Wikipedia. And I think there's one more question that I have answered about the wiki object instead of the sentence.
Yeah. One was also about, maybe that's more interesting, about the usefulness of these annotations for typical users. Maybe you answered already that?
Yeah, I don't think that Wikipedia, the Contropedia, what it is right now, is not intended for a typical Wikipedia user. It might be, we might repurpose for them, but that would be a sort of repurposing of the repurpose. What Wikipedia is good at, Contropedia is good at now, is to help controversy mappers, let's say, or social scientists, to look at their controversy in Wikipedia. What happened to their controversy in Wikipedia. And as for the wiki objects versus sentences, I definitely agree with you, but there's a trade-off that is difficult to handle. From the moment, given the resources that we have, we choose, the trade-off is between being very close to what happened in the sentence, or follow the controversy over different sentences. Because the point is that the problem is that you're definitely right that sometimes what is controversial is not the wiki object but something around the wiki object. So it's important to see the change in context. But sometimes users also want to see where else the same thing has been discussed. And the way we built this connection to other controversial places is through the wiki object. But that's a trade-off.
Okay, so thank you very much, Fabian. Thank you very much, Tommaso.